Alright, so last month I did a post on Instagram and I had a ton of people requesting the recipe for it. So today I'm going to show you how to make a really easy Korean smoked brisket. This recipe uses a sous vide machine and a barbecue, but I'll leave alternate cooking directions in the description below if you don't have either. I also want to take a second and thank, well, you. My channel hit 250 subscribers this week and I'm so grateful for all of the support. And if this is your first time on my channel and you're interested in learning modern Korean and Asian dishes, consider subscribing. I release new episodes every week. And with all that being said, let's make some Korean brisket. Brisket is similar to pork belly in that it's a very tough cut with a massive fat cap on top. If you've never cleaned a brisket before, don't panic. It's super simple and actually a really good way to practice your knife skills. Generally speaking, you just want to clean off some of the excess fat on the top. At the end of the day, it's up to you how much you want to take off. There's no right or wrong way, and every brisket will be different. Just ensure you leave a layer of fat on top to make sure the brisket stays nice and juicy. Also, don't be like me, put a rag under your cutting board to stop it from sliding around. So this beast weighs in at 10 kilograms, or 22 pounds for my American friends. With a sous vide, you're only limited by the size of the vacuum seal bag, so I'd recommend going a bit smaller than this. I ended up having to clean off a bit more of the fat from the top than I would have liked just to get it into the bag, but it still came out incredibly juicy. I also ended up having to take about half an inch off from one of the sides, but I saved every scrap of meat and turned it into Korean barbecue. You can check out the video above for the recipe. There isn't too much to do to the bottom of the brisket since there isn't a ton of fat. Test to make sure you can get the thickest part of the brisket into a vacuum seal bag, and once you can, we can move on to the rub. In a small bowl, combine 2 cups of brown sugar, 1/3 cup of kosher salt, 1 teaspoon of freshly cracked black pepper, and the secret ingredient, Shin Ramyun seasoning packets. I'll leave the recipe in the description to make your own seasoning mix, but honestly, after 2 attempts of making my own, this easily yielded the best results. You can usually get them in packs of 6, and because they're instant ramen, they're pretty cheap. You'll need about 1 cup or roughly 12 packets worth. Add them to the rub and give it a thorough mix. You can also add a 1/4 cup of Gochugaru if you really like a good punch of heat. Take the rub and begin to massage it into the brisket. Take your time and really make sure it's worked in. The brown sugar will start to turn slightly damp, which will make it a lot easier. You'll want to ensure the entire brisket is thoroughly covered in rub, but save about a half a cup's worth. We'll need it for later. Before we sous vide the brisket, we're going to smoke it for about 4 hours. We want the same results of a smoked brisket, but we also don't want to get up at 2 AM to smoke a brisket for 16 hours straight. I mean, really, ain't nobody got time for that. If you've never smoked anything before, you can check out my video at the top on how to smoke a pork shoulder. Place the brisket on the opposite side away from the heat. Don't waste any of those pan drippings either. I smoked mine for 4 hours, but it really all depends on how much smoke you like and really how much time you have. My recipes should always be seen as guidelines rather than rules, and I always encourage you to experiment. Cover the brisket and smoke at around 225 degrees Fahrenheit or 125 degrees Celsius. After 4 hours, the brisket will be nice and smoky and have a decent smoke ring. The rub will also have turned into a slightly sticky glaze. You're going to want to let the brisket completely cool before trying to get it into a vacuum seal bag, just to make it easier. Take your time and shimmy it little by little until it's inside the bag. I would also recommend triple sealing each bottom just to be sure. I double bagged mine, but in the past I generally haven't, so it's not necessary. Set your sous vide to 143 degrees Fahrenheit and carefully lower it into the water bath. If you can, clip the brisket to the top of the water bath to allow more circulation. Sous vide the brisket for 48 hours at 143 degrees Fahrenheit. This will make the brisket buttery tender and give it a medium doneness. Wrapping the water bath in plastic wrap will stop it from evaporating quickly. Remove the brisket from the water bath and thoroughly pat it dry with paper towel. For the final step, we're going to char the outside, giving it that bark brisket is famous for. Make sure your barbecue is ripping hot for this. Take the leftover rub from earlier and give it one final coat on the top. Being very careful and using tongs, char the outside of the entire brisket. You want it to just turn black. It'll be deeply caramelized but not burnt. I know it's going to be very hard to resist, but allow the brisket to rest for at least 10 minutes before slicing. Now let's just take a second and enjoy this. You could literally cut this with a spoon, but it's still firm like a steak. And that's it. Korean smoked brisket. So simple, anyone can do it. Thanks for watching. If you want to learn more modern Korean dishes, consider subscribing. I release episodes weekly. You can also check me out on Facebook and Instagram for more content.